Hey everybody, it's your girl Tawana B with Not Your Normal Conversation. Hello, happy Wednesday, or some may say happy hump day. Whichever you prefer, I'll take it. I'm glad to see you all here. I know people are just getting off of work, so I appreciate you when you do tune in. I just have one quick announcement before I announce my special guest. And he is special. We've been waiting a long time for this. So, Chris, I just want to make this one announcement and then we can get right to it. New Beginnings is having a community resource fair, and it's about transforming communities and creating new beginnings. It's on Saturday, August 13th. It's going to be in Grove Hall, Dorchester Center of Warren Street and Crawford Street from 12 to 3 p.m. Stacy Borden, the founder and director of this program, will be there. And we would love for everybody to come out and join us. I think this is a great way for people to know people in their community. And it's also a resource fair to get to know what's in your community and what resources will be helpful to you and your family. So, again, this fair is going to be on Saturday, August 13th. Grove Hall, Dorchester, corner of Warren Street and Crawford Street from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. So we hope you'll all join us there. It's a community resource fair sponsored by New Beginnings Reentry Services. So, Chris Bijoux, how are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
It is great to see you. It's been, I remember my first time meeting you at the Juvenile Symposium, and I remember when you walked up, I was like, yes, because I told you I had skimmed to give you the pamphlet to tell you who's speaking.
You did.
I'm not going to lie, I was like, and then I saw your name and I Googled you. And then I said, is he on Facebook? I gotta make sure I keep this guy's contact. I hadn't even spoken yet, but I knew that I needed to. There was you and another woman there that I needed to have contact with. So it was really funny that when you got up and you started speaking, I go, God, thank you, thank you in
You
advance for telling me why I needed to have him as a contact. You are powerful and you are young. You are young and black and educated, and more importantly, you're real and transparent. And I saw that when you didn't come up with a bunch of papers speaking off of papers about the black and brown community and the injustice and racism. That's not what you did. You were quite honest. You didn't use a microphone, which I respected. And we got to meet your lovely wife and your son. And I actually was honored to see your son, because now I know the type of man he's going to grow up to be, looking at his father. And we need more men like that in our community. So, Chris, welcome. And I want you to just share with us who you are and what you're trying to do in the black and brown community, or what you're going to do, not try to do.
Well, I mean, it's really hard to say anything after that lovely introduction, Tawana. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're
Um,
welcome.
who I am is kind of layered, right? And what I'm trying to do. And I think over the course of this conversation, that will probably come out a bit more. But I kind of just want to take a step back for a moment, because it has become very customary of me to, whether it's an interview, it's a lecture, it's some type of presentation. I am a lover of poetry. I love spoken words.
Absolutely.
When you at the talk that you were at, we didn't have an opportunity to finish the spoken word because they had AV issues. But nonetheless, I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you and with the audience a spoken word that I think will really help set the stage and contextualize the conversation that we're having today around, the Black and Brown community and the issue of the legal system, the unjustness within this system, and what we mean by systems. And so I want to take a minute to step back and share that. And then once we go through that, then we can definitely open this up and get into, as you say, a very transparent and vulnerable conversation, because I don't know how to be anything but. And so I am going to be incredibly unfiltered here. It's the evening time, so I'll probably be a bit more unfiltered.
Absolutely. And that's fine with me. That's what I want. I want you to be as transparent so that we can really get it. I think, like you said, when we use big words and we try to sugarcoat things, we never get the true meaning of what it is that we're supposed to know. So I will add this to the stream.
Perfect. And I
There you
will go
go.
ahead and share it. Awesome.
There you
So,
go.
to those tuning in, again, I am a lover of spoken words, and I think this is one of my favorites, and it really is going to set the stage for the conversation that we're having. And so, I hope that you find as much power and inspiration in it as I always do. So, let's go ahead and start.
We forgot we were worshiping beings. We forgot you, Black Jesus. We forgot the King of Kings. We forgot crowns do nothing for kings but put weight on their heads and a target on their backs. We forgot they tax our heads and put weight on our backs. We forgot Sodom and Gomorrah were leveled by brimstone and divine judgment, but Mississippi is still standing. We forgot burning cities. We forgot cities are still burning. We forgot colors are seasonal and that this skin will fade too. I forgot my skin. Or perhaps I just ran out of fucks to give. We forgot that some kids' utopias is a roof that won't whisper the night to the sleeping bodies below. We forgot bodies sleep below. We forgot bodies float. Bodies hang. We forgot barbecue postcards, strange fruit, and hooded men. I forgot my rage and the post-it leaves underneath my tongue. I forgot my tongue and how it used to fit so perfectly in my purse next to my womanly duties. I forgot my purse and my high heel stilts. I forgot balancing is no longer an act when you're hiding behind imported hair, a downloaded smile, and voice trained to jump through hoops for flames for your snaps and applause. You don't get it. Shoot, you already forgot you woke up this morning. You forgot to close the faucet when you were scrubbing that pot, that plate, that spoon on your left butt cheek or whatever, but you remember how that song goes, right? You remember how it went? You remember you wanted your Grand Chai tea latte with 3 pumps, skim milk, light water, no foam, and served at 120 degrees. You remember how spiritual of an experience that was? I forgot where I wrote this. I forgot if I was just ranting or if I'd forgotten to close the faucet when I was scrubbing that pot, that plate, that spoon on my tongue or whatever, but I remember how this goes. I remember how spiritual of an experience this is. I forgot my heart was a burning city. Shoot, you already forgot. I forgot my tongue, remember? We forgot that some kids walk past their utopias every morning. Suburban bricks standing tall in proclamation of what statistics say they will never truly attain. We forgot that some kids try so hard to forget tomorrow is even coming. We forgot that there were kids smiling in barbecue postcards next to strange fruit and hooded men. Or perhaps we never had any fucks to give, you know. Sometimes I forget how hard it is to remember.
Wow.
I just want to thank you for letting me share this. I
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. That was deep. Yes, Jonathan Long, I agree. That was deep. That was deep.
It's it's always a painful reminder to me to never forget why I do this work. And I think when we're embedded in the work for so long, it becomes data and statistics and numbers, and we forget why we do this. I'm nothing unique in this work. I am a product of my ancestors. I am a product of my community. I'm a product of the strangers that I have encountered who have helped shape my perspective. And so I could never forget what brings me into this work. And so I always have to be as vulnerable. I always have to be as open. And that's why this work is so incredibly meaningful to me, and to do it honestly, because I have an obligation, I have a duty to my ancestors, not to sanitize, not to sugarcoat, not to disrespect what they fought for and what everyone today is fighting for. But we like to forget those things. We'd like to forget community. We like to forget the struggle. We like to forget the challenges. And we just, we love to ride the wave of the next it thing or the best practices and, all the statistical numbers we throw out there. And I always have to share with people a reminder of why we do this. So when Lois is talking about barbecue postcards and strange fruit and hooded men, that image that comes to my mind of my ancestors hanging from a tree. The image that comes to my mind when she says kids smiling next to strange fruit and barbecue postcards. When I'm reminded that white kids were brought to the lynchings of my ancestors with picnic baskets as they partied and celebrated the loss of life of one of my ancestors. And so it's always a painful reminder. And I think that's the honor and the privilege that you give me to be able to speak today, because I really do think I'm not here to talk statistics. And I can do that. I can talk statistics all day long. I can talk numbers all day long.
Right.
But there's another reason why we do this work.
Absolutely.
There's another reason why we do this work, and what we are fighting for, what we continue to fight for, that seems very elusive. It seems as if we will never get there, right? Like there's this constant struggle. We have died for everything. We have died for nothing. We have died for everyone, but no one dies for us.
Right.
No one dies for us. No one stands up for us when it really matters. And so it's a painful reminder that this work, my work in the legal system, is something that I don't want to do. I don't. I'll be quite honest with you. I don't want to do, but it's something that I have to do.
Absolutely.
Because I don't know how to do anything else except show up and present for the community that has given me everything. It has given me everything. And I watch time and time again as we forget those things and we try to further distance ourselves away. And I watch in the corporate world how, they have corporatized and monetized our struggle.
Right.
They have continued to disrespect our existence as if we are invisible, as if we are voiceless. And so we can never forget. We can never forget. And I hope that was a painful reminder for everyone too, that, we conversation on dismantling structural racism for the past 2 years, or at least, we're in this sort of national conversation on dismantling structural racism. And I was watching people take their superficial knees and Black Lives Matter and all of this. And yet we continue to die.
Right.
And so we must never forget that why we do this matters more than we think. And so thank you. I can't promise you that I will be I will be reserved here. I can't promise you that I won't tear up at some point, because once I start remembering my ancestors, once I start remembering the 246 years of chattel slavery, the 100 years of American apartheid, the more than 50 years of this continued struggle, once I start remembering these things, it really is hard to contain and to control myself. But I embrace my rage and I welcome it. And I think it will just carry me through this conversation that we're about to have.
Absolutely. I haven't met many men, Black men, with the exception of a few. I just actually met, I met Ivy's future husband, and he came. I had an event here, just a small dinner, Thanksgiving in July. It's always great to be thankful for everything. And not only is he educated, but he's very transparent in what he thinks about the same things that you think about. And I haven't met many Black men that are willing to stand on and say, hey, listen, my ancestors, they fought for this, but more importantly, what are we going to do about it, Black and brown community? And it's kind of like you are not shoving us, but pushing us into a space that I think that a lot of us are uncomfortable with. I think we're uncomfortable with knowing about the fact that we have just been sitting on our hands for a long time. There's a lot of people that do sit on their hands. They're afraid to offend people. They don't want to offend anybody. No, we can't say that because there's white people in the room, or we have to look around before we say what we have to say because, oh, there's a white person in the room, or they're trying to figure me out as a Black person's talking to me. Is she white and Black? What can I say? What can I say? You know, I've watched all of these things for many years, and because I'm so light complected, it's been an issue that I've had my whole life. Right. And so as I listened to you speak at the symposium, I knew that I had to have you here because I feel like we ignore, like you said, it's not that we don't know, we ignore things that we should keep in the forefront and really fight for. And I feel like you are a person who can stir some things up in a lot of people as they watch this interview, whether it's tonight, tomorrow morning, in the middle of the night, whenever they watch it. I believe that you are going to stir something up in them, as you did me, that's going to really make them think if the way that we've been living, if our ancestors will be proud that we represented them in the way that we should, especially in the justice system. You showed a video where young juveniles were being locked up in chains. It was like, and then you showed the boat of the slavery, and I'm like, my God, this is all connected. This is just modern day plantation. This is just modern day slavery. But these are young Black children being put in spaces like this. And so first I have to ask you, how did you decide to be a part of this? Because this is, to me, it's a movement, but right. Enough people aren't moving. So how did you become a part of this? What made you say to yourself, this is what I'm going to do, even if it puts a target on my back? This is what I'm going to say, even if nobody likes it.
What made me decide to do this? I've always been involved in this work in some way. I started off in healthcare disparities. It's really understanding inequities and the aspect of racism in healthcare. And I was privileged and fortunate enough to stumble across two mentors, the late Michael Bird and his wife, Linda Clayton, who wrote the 2-volume Pulitzer Prize nominated book, An American Health Dilemma. And I served as their senior research assistant for a few years when I first started grad school. But even before that, I was, hardcore in the health and public health side. But they started exposing me to a world that was previously hidden to me. It was just previously hidden. And the more I began to understand the intersections of health and economics, of health and geography, of health and education, the deeper I got into history. And I remember Michael one day saying, he showed me this little sheet. It had essentially every academic discipline. I mean, anthropology, biology, philosophy. I was like, what on earth are you doing here? I'm not, what is this, right?
Right.
And he said, if you're truly serious about understanding the evolution of racism and how it affects us internally and externally, this is what you have to commit your life to, understanding everything here. And that was eye-opening, right? And Michael and Linda had a private library of some of the rarest books you've ever seen. I mean, thousands of books. And I used to essentially live there. And so I had the opportunity to just read hundreds and hundreds of books. And the more I learned, the more I started to identify where I wanted to position myself in this work was to understand the history of racism in this country and the evolution and the manifestations of racism in the contemporary sense. How it connected to the legal system was almost by accident, if one could say that. I was serving as a consultant for the Department of Youth Services. And now I, by this time, had.
Chris, did you just say accident? I needed to make sure I heard you. Right.
I mean, one could say it was an accident. Now, though I was already studying it from the healthcare side, right? Okay. I was never really looking at it from the legal system aspect, right? Okay. Now, I had, again, a lot of academic knowledge and understanding of the issue. But it was when I was asked to give a presentation on the history of racism in America at the Department of Youth Services that it something just it just clicked. Like it just clicked. You start to see this cycle taking shape, and I'm watching, decade after decade, generation after generation, the evolution of racism and this sort of perpetuation of our oppression, of our repression, of our subjugation. And then I'm made to believe that things are getting better. I was like, I'm not convinced that things are getting better when you begin to understand your history.
Right.
And so I stayed there. I made it my priority and my commitment to help the legal system understand that they are caught in a very vicious cycle. They are trapped in a system that is essentially, it is the evolution of the convict leasing system. It is the evolution of, what Douglas Blackman calls slavery by another name. Like, we are witnessing modern day slavery.
We
And
are.
many people are not really understanding just how deep it is. And that's really where I landed on this work. And so just kind of sharing perspective from a historical component, from a public health and epidemiological component, because again, what I have done is essentially carrying on the work of giants before me. I'm nowhere in their stratosphere to study racism as a virus.
Right.
So I'm committed to helping people understand how this virus affects them, and then how we can cure ourselves of this virus. And it just so happens that the legal system and the child welfare system, where a lot of my work intersects, is just where I'm just noticing some of the most gross inequities and acts of racism. And I put myself on the line because I always think I'm running out of time. So I don't have time to tell people gently. I don't have time to tell people nicely. We got shit to do.
Absolutely.
Like, my kings and queens are dying. My brothers and sisters are dying. So I can't ride with the, we got to be patient. I understand some things require patience, but there's a certain urgency that you have to operate, to get to that place, and I don't have time. I don't have time to play around. And so I can only give it to them the only way I know how. And that's to be vulnerable. That's to be transparent. That's to tell them exactly how it unfolded. History is history. It is what it is. I mean, you can try to rewrite history all you want, but I know what happened, and I know what's happening, and I know what's happening looks a lot like what happened 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago. We're just more clever about it. We've evolved our vocabulary to try to find nicer ways of saying things, but it's the same bullshit, right? And pardon my language, but that's what's happening. And so when you begin to notice, the gross inequities of how Black youth, brown youth, non-white youth are criminalized because of the way that they look, the inequities that happen at every stage in the system, the legal system, the child welfare system, the education system, the healthcare system, you name it, when you begin to see that it looks the same regardless of the system that you select, I don't have time to tell people nicely anymore. We've asked nicely. It didn't really get us anywhere. And so now we have to ask this way. At least I have to ask this way. And if they're offended by it, cool. It is what it is.
I ask that way also. So we're in agreement with that. I ask any way that I feel is going to get the job done. And sometimes, again, we are not voiceless. We're just not heard. And you use two words that I now use: disarm and dismantle. Dismantle means to tear down, to take apart. So there is nothing, right? So what you're saying with that word alone, never mind disarm, I'll put that on the shelf for a minute. I'm going to use the word dismantle because I think that that's the most important thing that I've ever heard anybody say about this failed system. Some like to say it's broken. And sometimes when things are broken, you can actually fix it. You can repair it. This is not a system that's broken, everybody. This is a system that was not made for us. It's like FUBU, for us, by us. That's not what this is. And at this point, if we want to be transparent, we'd have to dismantle this system in order for it to not, it's not about working in our favor. It's about working for us, period. It's never worked for us.
Well, so that depends on how we define the system, right? And so for me, and I've gotten myself into a fair share of trouble with some really powerful people when they often say, for example, yeah, I agree, the system isn't broken. There's nothing broken about it. It works perfectly fine. Right? If it's to continue to criminalize Blackness, if it's to continue to isolate, if it's to continue to target, to essentially function the exact way it's functioning, then it's not broken. Right. But the system for me, and this is where my perspective with the mainstream thinking about it looks and feels differently, is because sometimes I become incredibly confused by what the hell that means. Right. So people are always looking at the system like it's this living, breathing thing. Yeah. And so I recall a very important policymaker, and I getting into a very heated public discussion on the idea of the system. And I got incredibly frustrated because they were not answering any of my questions, right? I was given the politically correct answers. And so in my frustration, I said, well, may you please introduce me to systems so I can ask systems some questions that I need answers to. And I thought they thought I was being rude, but I was really being serious, because the answers I'm often met with is, the system is too big. We can't just go in and change it. And, the system pushes back. I was like, what the hell are these people talking about? Right. And so when we begin to evolve our thinking to realize that the systems are us, we created these systems. It's our mindset. It's our framing. It's our perspective. We are the systems. And so when you tell me that the system is not capable of changing, what you are essentially telling me is that you are not capable of changing or transforming, or you are not willing to at least transform in this moment. And so in that conversation, well, it's broken. I don't, it's not broken if we continue to live in the society where whiteness is normalized. It's the cultural norm, and everyone else is just trying to find their space in it. Right. And so once you begin to understand how that impacts you internally, right, you start to play this very dangerous game with yourself, like Kenneth and Mamie Clark exposed in like the 40s experiment with the doll studies that eventually was used as a catalyst in the Brown v. Board of Education ruling that overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. When you start to internalize all of these things, you start to believe that you are not good enough, that you're not beautiful enough, that you're not talented enough, right? And so they have made you believe all of these things about you, and it plagues your thinking, it plagues your perspective. It's a virus and it spreads, right? And so now you have essentially corrupted your own internal system, and their internal system has made them believe that they are always superior, they are always better. And so when we say this system, I'm like, Are you willing to evolve? Are you willing to transform? Because yes, it is capable of it, but it's only capable of it if you're willing to critically interrogate and analyze yourself and how you are perpetuating some of the inequities. But if I'm not willing to do that, right? If I'm not willing to interrogate myself and how I'm using my power and my privilege in a way that continues to oppress and suppress people, then yes, the system is incapable of it because I am incapable of it. And that's what I think about the systems. The systems are a collection of people in incredibly powerful positions who assume that they are leaders, because again, the two are fundamentally very different. Leaders and people in leadership positions are not the same.
Exactly.
There are people in incredibly powerful leadership positions who seem to think that they're doing all of the right things or saying all of the right things, but the outcomes continue to be what they are. I know what the numbers are. And so when they tell me that, oh, the system is just not ready for it, I can't buy that. I can't believe that anymore. Because again, I would feel more respected if they told me that they are not ready for it. If they are not right now in their person, I'm not ready for that type of evolution. I'm not ready for that type of change. I'm not ready to give up this power and privilege. I'll respect you more. But when they just sort of push that responsibility on the system, then
Right.
what's the work? Right. And I think many people in these organizations have sort of adopted that mentality and that mindset. They've begun to believe that same line of thinking. Oh, it's the system, it's the system. And they don't even realize that they are agents of the system. They are representatives of the system. They are the system.
So I have a question for you. Would you say, I heard you say a number of things. It's our way of thinking. It's the way we've been taught to think. Would you say that the Black and brown community is whitewashed?
Mm. It would be difficult to not say that we've been whitewashed. I mean, everything about our history, at least as it was taught to us, isn't our real history, right?
Mhm.
And so we've been given information that isn't useful to us about our history. For example, whenever they teach Black history in schools, they always seem to start our existence with slavery, as if we didn't exist before slavery, right? As if our contributions didn't create the society. And so, yes, I mean, in a sense, it's been whitewashed, but no, but, and it continues to be whitewashed. However, we have a responsibility, the Black and brown community, we have a responsibility with all that we know now, right? To have a very real conversation with ourselves as a community regarding what is it that we aim for? What is the goal? What do we want to do? Because communities function very differently, right? And so I use a definition of community that comes from one of my mentors, my dearest, Dr. Bob Robinson. And when I think of community, I think of these four pillars: history, culture, context, and geography. Those four pillars comprise of community.
Mhm.
Communities essentially function that way, right? So I'm from Brooklyn, New York, for example.
Mhm.
Brooklyn is one of the largest cities in the country. It's one of the most diverse cities in the country. But Brooklyn has a collection of communities within it. They all have their own histories. They all have their own cultures, right? In the context of their experiences. And so when we begin to understand what that means for our communities, but then the larger community, the larger Black and brown community, and how
Mhm.
do we overcome some of the challenges and tensions that we seem to manifest on each other, right? But I also believe that a lot of that is due to the internalized hatred and rage that we have for ourselves.
Mm.
And so if it's whitewashing, I think it's just probably one of the most effective forms of brainwashing that continues to be very, very effective, right? In the words of James Baldwin, you know, when someone does something to you long enough, they no longer have to do it to you. You begin to do it to yourself. And I think we have continued this suffering in many ways because of our inability to have that very real and transparent and necessary community conversation. What is the end goal? I don't, many times, I don't know what the end goal is. And there
Mm.
are just a lot of individuals who are looking out for their own self-interest. It's not in the community's interest, it's in their own self-interest. And so, yeah, the white community can sit back and just watch the destruction happen. They don't have to do it to you anymore. You're doing it to yourself. So,
So if I had to say that we're set aside and set apart, or that we've set ourselves aside and we set ourselves apart because we feel like we have to stay out of the way, how do we get to a space where we don't want to be out of the way and we do want to be seen and we do want to be heard and we do want change? We talk about it often at our dinner tables and with our friends and sometimes with people like you, and we have these conversations, but it doesn't go past there. Nothing happens after that. usually people forget, or they don't want to watch these type of podcasts because they don't want to hear the hard truth. And the reality is that we actually have to do something in order for them to see that we're not going to back down. Until then, this will still be a system that's just for them, and we're going to set ourselves aside every single day until we make the necessary changes. So I have to ask you first, before you can dismantle anything, you have to disarm it, because we can't dismantle them. They are aware that we're not happy with the way things are. So we have to disarm them in a way that we're saying, hey, listen, enough is enough. But in order for us to do that, we have to be educated. And so
Yeah,
that's where you come in.
I mean, that's where myself and a lot of other people come in. But even when I say disarm, what I want us to do is to disarm ourselves from that internalized oppression, that internalized racism, that internalized hatred.
Absolutely.
Instead, what I want us to arm ourselves with is a better understanding of our history, a more evolved perspective of community. I do think things are happening within Black and Brown communities. The challenge is that I don't think that there's enough support within the Black and Brown community for other Black and Brown queens and kings that are doing a lot of this great work, right? And again, there's some layer of selfishness involved. People want the credit for what's being, accomplished. But if we are in this as a true community, then you don't care who gets the credit. We all win. And there's this sort of I win, you lose mentality, or you lose, I win, in order for me to participate in this work. Quite frankly, if you win, I win. And so we have to adopt a lot of that. But I don't believe that we've purged ourselves and disarmed ourselves of that internalized hatred, because it is really difficult. And I'm speaking from personal experience as a Black man, the world according to Chris here, to remember, right? Like saying, how we forget to remember all of these things and not go into this place where you want to retreat. You just don't want to open up to anyone.
Right.
Because it's painful. It is painful. It opens the door into your heart and your soul, and you start thinking about all of these complex traumas, and they impact your relationships. A lot of what's happening now is an issue of fractured relationships. It impacts your relationships with your community. It impacts your relationship with your colleagues, your friends, and you're not willing to take that chance. You're not willing to put your life on the line. You're not willing to do that.
Right.
Because it's a very scary thing, because you start to think about who truly has my back, who's in this with me. I know a lot of what people say, but are they truly with me? And it's hard. It's hard to put ourselves on the line like that. And so I think we internally and intentionally shut that down, because to open that up, when you don't have people who are willing to be responsive to that, to actively listen to what that trauma is, to take that vulnerable step with you and sharing some of their complex trauma so we can see the similarities and in creating an action plan on how do we move forward, you don't want to take that risk. And so I say all of that to say it's complex. It is really complex to ask people to do that. But then so many are not willing to take that first step. And again, that first step requires that critical self-interrogation of yourself. What has contributed to my traumas? Like, confronting your traumas is a very, very serious and real thing.
It is.
Are you ready for that? Right? Because that is going to allow you to learn some things about yourself. And the things that you find out about yourself, I don't think many people are prepared for. Right. And so we do that as a way of protecting ourselves. And when it manifests in certain ways, people don't understand that anger. They don't understand that rage. They just seem to think that, oh, it's ignorance, so they don't care. They probably care so much that they're willing to stay guarded because they don't trust. There's no relationship. And I think within the Black and Brown community, the issue of fractured relationships is strong. I think it's deep. I think it's real. And there's a lot of fractured relationships that we have with each other and that we have with ourselves, and we haven't repaired that.
Yeah.
We haven't repaired that. So until we get there, I am not fully convinced that the dismantling racism part that has become such, an in vogue term across the country the past 2 years is even achievable. It's not achievable.
Wow.
I personally do not think that.
Now, for a person who speaks with such conviction about the injustices, and for you to say that, I'm shocked because you are a person that stands on the front line and fights really hard for us, but you don't think that we could achieve this. And
Not
I
in my
want to
lifetime.
I
Not in
want to
my,
know
not in
why.
my, not in my lifetime.
Not in
Maybe
your life.
not in my lifetime. Maybe in another lifetime. I mean, we'll all be long dust by then. And the reason I say that is because, again, you're not going to just overnight repair more than 400 years of internalized oppression and hatred. It doesn't happen overnight. I think it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of therapy. I think it's going to take a lot of trust. And that requires patience with the self. And to be quite honest with you, I said before, I don't have that much time in this work, right? I don't have that much time in this work. I don't see enough of those conversations happening. Do I want us to get there one day? Sure. But even the ways in which we approach the work, I think it's not even a matter of changing the community, right? Because to change something means that you've identified a very specific problem, you're going through problem analysis, and you're implementing some type of solution to make it better, right? We go from 5% this to 10% that next year. This ain't what it's about. It's about community and societal transformation. And we haven't had that conversation. What community do we visualize? As the Black and brown community, we haven't had that conversation about what is the community we visualize. And so I will only believe that those things are achievable if we can have that type of open conversation as a community, right? And then we put it all out there. But until we do this, I'm sorry, a lot of this, is it's surface work. It's surface work. Like you got to do the real hardcore deep work. And that requires going deep within. And we're hurting. We are all hurting. And it's hard. It's impossible not to hurt. It's impossible not to hurt. Every day you wake up, you're bombarded by another news story of one of your queens or one of your kings being gunned down, being murdered, modern day lynchings. How do you take that chance? How do you take that risk? We haven't seen enough things in this society to make us want to take that chance or take that risk. And so we don't do it because our survival is on the line. Our lives are on the line. We don't do it. And I understand why we don't. And so what I'm fighting for is hopefully a day where we can get there. Is a day where we can get there. Will we get there in my lifetime? I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to be proven wrong. I am a young 37. I would love to be proven wrong. I know what the life expectancy for Black males are. I don't think we're going to get there because I haven't seen it in my my mentors' lifetimes or my ancestors' lifetime. What makes me believe with everything that I have seen, everything that I have witnessed in this society, in the context of American society, that we are the ones that are going to do it? I don't believe it. We just haven't had those conversations. And so, we get stuck on all the mainstream things and diversity, equity, inclusion, this, and we're going to bring this speaker and we're going to look at this. And then when the real work starts, when you have to stay committed to that investment, everyone starts running away.
Chris, can I ask you, what does the real work look like to you? Because everyone has their own definition of what the work looks like.
Right.
We're all out in the community in some shape or form. And, we're pushing what we feel is the Black and brown agenda. So what does the work really look like, and what does it entail, and how can we get on board so that we're collectively in the same frame of mind to win?
Right.
Even if it's in our great grandchildren's lifetime, if we can start. But like you said, our children shouldn't have to fight this fight.
But they will. They will. I mean, unfortunately, they will inherit this fight. And so what does the real work look like? For example, within the Black and brown community, again, the fractured relationships are real. Like the issues of colorism are real, right? There's just so much that we as a collective community, right? And there's so much power concentrated in the Black and brown community. And sometimes I get frustrated when I hear something like, we are powerless and we don't have the power. We have a lot of damn power.
We do.
A lot of damn power. There's a lot of power concentrated within the Black and brown community. It just so happens that we don't exercise that power. The relationships are so fractured that we couldn't even utilize this power if we wanted to. Not in a way that is going to have any useful purpose against what we are fighting against. We're too internally divided. And so what the real work looks like for me, again, the starting point is first starting with self, right? Having this real deep conversation with, look, what is it that I want? Right? What is it that I want with everything that I'm going through, everything that I struggle with, not only just my trauma, but the vicarious, the ancestral trauma that we all carry, that type of burden, having that real conversation with ourselves. Like we have to do that. When we get to that conversation, then we start opening the conversation up to a larger community. Our first, the community within the closest proximity to us, and then the larger Black and brown community. But again, fractured relationships, right? And so that's why when we go into the organizational workspaces, it becomes really difficult. But also, look, I'm very radical in my thinking. I honestly don't care. I hold myself accountable to the things that I say. Until we find a way where our survival isn't dictated by white economics, white culture, white society, then we are always at that mercy. We are always at that mercy. There's so much economic power concentrated in the Black and brown community. How much of that is reinvested back in the Black and brown community, right? And so just kind of starting there, I start to think about how we take so much of our economic resources that leaves our communities and never trickle back in. They never trickle back in. And so we are not reinvesting in our own communities. Who is going to do that for us?
Right.
Who's going to do that for us? And so these are the starting points. And so we get mad at times, like, a lot of it is, white people this, white people that. Yeah, a lot of it is, but a lot of it is also based on the things that we are doing to ourselves and to each other. Are we willing to engage in that conversation? It's not an easy conversation to have, but it's not a conversation that's being had in many spaces, right? And so these are some of the starting points, and it's really difficult. So when I hear stuff like dismantling structural racism within American society, like, I'm optimistic because I'm alive.
Right.
I'm optimistic because I'm alive and I'm deeply embedded in this work. But there's also that part of me that understands that, shit, I ain't never gonna see this. Dismantling structural racism. We haven't even dismantled the internalized racism, and we want to dismantle the structural component. It sometimes feels like this sort of cyclical work that we're doing where we're getting nowhere. It's like movement without motion. We're just running, we're running and running. And you realize there's no destination. What's the destination? Someone tell me, even within organizations, when, again, the past 2 years, many organizations have been prioritizing anti-racism and diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And just for the public, the two are not the same. Anti-racism work is not the same as diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I know there are some similarities. They're fundamentally very different. Organizations engage in this kind of work, right? And sometimes there is no clear end goal. Like, this is work we'll always be doing forever, for life.
Right.
But I'm just trying to say, look, within the next 2 to 5 years, this is where we want to get to. The type of investment that is necessary to achieve those goals, but there isn't the economic investment. There isn't the human resources investment, not to sustain those type of goals. And so I think the lack of clarity that we see within organizational spaces is the same lack of clarity I see. Again, this is the world according to Chris. You're all open to disagree with me, that I see in Black and brown communities regarding, what we want.
Right.
What is it that we want? I don't think we've defined that because we haven't had that conversation. And again, these conversations are not easy conversations to have. And so if we don't engage in those conversations, what we are essentially doing is ensuring that the next generation will just be other versions of us having similar conversations.
Wow. And you see, Chris, why we needed two parts to this conversation.
I don't know. Maybe after today, you probably won't have me back tomorrow. But,
I will definitely have you back tomorrow, because you're not just, I'm listening to you, and I am internally, like you said, it's time for us to start checking ourselves. We need to start with us in order for this to work, right? So I am listening to you and I'm like, check, check, check. Because at this point, that's what we need to do in order for us to even start. It's like a dog chasing their tail. You know why they never catch it? Because they don't sit down. They're chasing it in circles. If you sat down, you'd probably catch it. All you have to do is turn around and grab it. And I think that this is kind of what the Black and brown community looks like. It's like we talk about it and we may chase it for a few minutes and we're just running around in circles, but we don't actually catch it because we don't sit down and self-analyze who we are, where we come from.
But
Where
there's also a scary component to that, right? Because when we do, we die sometimes. when we do, sometimes how many massacres on successful Black communities have there been in this country? Tulsa wasn't the only one, right? And so when we do, there's the very real possibility that we will not live, right, long enough to benefit from that the success. And so it's almost like you're operating from this damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that's a very, very real thing. But that's
it's also very scary.
It's a very, very scary thing, absolutely. But we face worse. I mean, shit, our ancestors face worse, right? And we are carriers of their bloodline. We got this, but in order for us to truly get it, there needs to be some conversations that we have with each other, that we have with ourselves, that we have with the larger community about what do we want? What is the end goal? There's so much power concentrated within our community. But if there's so much infighting, if there's so much internalized hatred, then again, that will manifest on those closest to you, and that's our communities. And so we are also enraged because, yes, a lot of these things have been done to us. There's nothing wrong with us.
Right.
There are things that have been done to us to make us feel like there are things wrong with us. But then we begin to believe that these things are wrong with us.
It's true.
When you begin to believe that these things are wrong with you, you start engaging in certain behaviors, and other people don't understand it. But for those who understand what rage is, you get it. And when you are enraged, it only manifests one way, as outrage. And when you're outraged, there's no telling what you're going to do. There's no telling what you're going to do. And so we have to find more constructive ways of controlling that rage, of rechanneling that rage. I think so many times that rage manifests on each other within the community. And it just perpetuates that divide, that lack of trust, those fractured relationships. And so again, it makes it more difficult for someone to trust you, to trust what you say, to trust that you got their back. When a lot, it really took a lot of reframing for me to, yes, there's a lot in terms of, Eurocentricity and whiteness and racism. But if that remains the dominant form of the conversation, we never evolve. If that remains the dominant form of the conversation, we never evolve. Because if we don't start to think about it in terms of the power that we have individually, and more so as a collective, as a community, and start thinking about how do we use that power to advance our communities, then essentially, unfortunately, the type of transformation that we're asking for is not the transformation that we're going to get in our lifetime. It's going to be so small, so incremental. We won't even recognize it. And so that's what I want. That's where I would want the conversation to shift. But we're all hurting. we're hurting.
So, I have an assignment for those who are watching, for those who will watch tomorrow, same time. We're here, Chris and I, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bring your friends. Bring your friends from the community. Bring your friends that you talk to, maybe your mother, your father, about these issues of racial injustice. The ones you see screaming at the news saying, oh my God, they just shot that black man in the back 80 times and he was unarmed. Let's have an open dialogue with Chris. He seems to have a lot of knowledge. I know for me, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, oh God, I have a lot of work to do. And
We
here
are.
I am thinking that I'm doing the work. And in fact, I haven't, like you said, all I'm doing really and honestly, and we have to be honest, is I'm scratching the surface. So I'm asking everybody who's watching this, who will watch this tomorrow, I'm asking you to show up for part 2 of Is the Justice System Just for the Black and Brown Community? I need Chris to open up more about what it's going to take for him to even think that even when he's gone, that this could be achieved before it gets to his great grandkids. And I also would like to know from Chris what he's working on and what we could become a part of to make his voice stronger in the community, even if people don't like it. Y'all know me already. Hey, I'll go anywhere where I can be rebellious in a good way. And I think that, we can use our anger and transform it into something else, but it's an internal clock. It's something internally inside of us, like Chris said, that we have to deal with, even when we don't want to, even when it hurts. We have to deal with ourselves in order for us to guide people and to lead them. They won't believe us. So we have to do more. So Chris and I will be here tomorrow night, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Not Your Normal Conversation. We'll speak more with Chris Bijoux about ways that we can not just transform and not even renew. Because I think renew is a word that Black and brown people are tired of hearing of. We definitely need a change. And the only way the change is going to come is if we start having these conversations with people like Chris and people like Ayanna Presley and people that no one wants to listen to because they think that they're angry Black people. Those are the people I actually want to talk to.
I'm not angry. I'm pissed off.
Right. Exactly. Oh, you know what? Those are the people that usually other.
I'm pissed. I don't want them to to sell my emotions short. And
you heard that. He said he's pissed off and he's about to make me pissed off too. I can tell tomorrow I'm probably going to be rearing to go. But I need us to come back and I need us to support Chris and to understand that the only way that this is going to work for us is if we stop being dogs chasing our tail and start doing the real work. Because as he said, we're only scratching the surface and that's not what I want. Even if I die trying, at least I know I left something with my kids for them to pick up where I left off. And unfortunately, they're going to have to do the work. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to Not Your Normal Conversation with your girl, Tawana B. And my guest, Chris Bijoux. We'll see you tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same place. Maybe Chris will have a different hat on and maybe he'll have a special guest with him so that we can say hello to his lovely family and the people that keep him grounded in doing this work and continuing to push forward. Every time I text Chris, I thank his family for allowing him to do this work because as he said, he has a target on his back. He's a Black man and he's giving people education and they don't want that from him. And he's not going to stand down, as you guys can see. He said he's mad as hell. So everybody, have a good night. We'll see you same time, same place. Chris, thank you. I will see you tomorrow. And wait until you see what the shirt I have on for tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to the shirt tomorrow.
Because I don't think anybody saw this that I have on today.
Amazing.
Yes. So I want people to understand that I know that this work is a lot more than what we think. And I'm on board, Chris. I'm ready. So whatever you have there for us, bring your A game tomorrow, Chris, because I want to hear more and I don't want you to hold back. You didn't do it today, don't do it tomorrow.
I'll try not to. Thank you so much, Tawana. I appreciate
Everybody, have a good night, and we'll see you same time, same place tomorrow on Not Your Normal Conversation with your girl, Tawana B. Ciao.